Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and today I have with us attorney Jennifer Quezada, and she's going to be talking to us about coming to the United States from the Dominican Republic and also her journey in law school. So, welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I'm such a pleasure to be part of your podcast.
I'm so happy that you're here, another fellow Dominicana to talk about her journey. And yes, so thank you so much. So we can get started with introducing yourself, who you are, what you do. Although I already said you're an immigration attorney, but yeah, who you are, what you do, and then we can get started of telling us your childhood in DR.
Sure. So, like you mentioned, my name is Jennifer Quezada. I am an attorney. I was born and raised in Dominican Republic. I grew up in Santo Domingo. My entire childhood was spent there. My parents are from different areas of DR. My dad is from Constanza, and my mom is from the south. She's from Las Matas de Farfán. I spent most of my childhood in DR. I was there until the age of 18, almost 19. I turned 19 when I moved here to the US.
Okay, awesome. So I will tell you the neighborhood my dad grew up in. I don't, because I know Santo Domingo, I've heard is really big actually. So there's like Santo Domingo East, West, and all that. So my dad grew up in Alma Rosa in
Okay.
that neighborhood. So that's all I know. I don't know anything else.
My dad actually works close to Alma Rosa, if I'm not mistaken, right
Okay.
now. I grew up near the one of the military bases. So near Las Fuerzas Armadas, like behind that area. That's where I grew up.
Okay. Interesting. Cool. Okay. So yeah, that's all I know is that that's where he was raised, Alma Rosa. And I always hear stories and stuff, and like they'll say like street names and stuff, and I'm just like, I have no idea what you guys talking about. But
Fair.
and I visited, and I visited and everything. And I'll just be like, one, I could never drive here unless it's like a death, unless it's like a life or death emergency. I was like,
Right.
I will not drive here. And so like, yeah, because I just feel like I would be lost. So
It's a very different vibe driving over there. It really, really is. It takes me when I go back, it takes me like a day to kind of get in the groove of things again.
yeah.
Really understand.
Yeah, like having to like honk the horn in the corner so like the people don't come or either flash your light so you tell people that
Right.
you're like coming in the corners. Yeah, it's I've learned a few things, although I haven't driven out there. I've learned a few things from when I visited and I'm just like, I don't know how people do it, honestly. All right. So can you tell us what events led you to move to the US?
Sure. So I had always wanted to eventually seek higher education and possibly a professional life here in the US. But what really kind of drove the point home was I actually started law school in Dominican Republic. I completed about a year and a half there of law school. And you might not know, but in law school, it's actually taught in DR by practicing attorneys. So, not just folks who have a law degree and only focus on, being professors, but actually practicing attorneys, practicing judges. And so, what that means is that they have day jobs. And so, classes are at night. And so I would end up leaving from school generally, around 11:30. By the time that I was kind of on the road and on my way back home was closer to midnight. Um, Unfortunately, part of society is that you have to be mindful as a
Yeah.
woman, driving by yourself. And, as protective as my parents wanted to be, I was still an adult and I still had to go to school. And so they couldn't be with me 24/7 to sort of protect me. And there were some instances in which, officer wanted to stop me. It was pretty dark area, and I hadn't committed any infractions. So
Yeah.
I'll leave it to your imagination what could have happened, and I just continued
Yeah.
to drive. And during that time, for whatever reason, there's a big focus on femicides. The killing of women was very prevalent, which I have to say was very unusual for DR. If there's anything that I've always loved about the country is that it protects its women and it protects its children. And so that's why I call it a weird face because it was at that point, it was not something that I had necessarily experienced or that had been in the media that I can recall in a very prominent way. And
Yeah.
so, given that, and the fact that I wanted to pursue a career in law, at the time I wanted to become a judge. And there was this one judge who I really admired. She was one of the youngest Supreme Court justices at the time in Dominican Republic. She really was making a difference, and unfortunately, she paid for it in terms of her family was threatened,
Oh,
her safety was threatened, and so because I wanted to have a similar path, and because I know who I am, and I know that I like to not sort of yield to what's wrong. And I probably would have gotten myself in some trouble because of that. I just knew that I wasn't going to have the professional life and even the personal life that I wanted to truly have if I remained there. So that's why I moved to the states.
so education, that seems to be a very common answer for people who decide to move to the United States. Is usually a lot of them is for education. Either they like want to learn English and it's like, oh, I'll go and, go to school there and then go back to their home country. And then eventually they end up staying. So education is a very common answer when people tell me, like the reason why they came. And so you knew that you wanted to be a judge. So how did it end up being law school?
Yeah, I was always interested in international relations and that sort of thing. And so when I was in DR going through high school, I was always interested in the UN, and sort of learning about different countries and different relationships, legal relationships that other countries had, specifically on the humanitarian aspect of
Right.
things. I think the most common one that most people know are asylum seekers, and it just was something that always piqued my curiosity. And then just, specifically, I was always very interested in arguing. My parents always, called me the little abogada, little attorney, because I was always defending my sister and always making a case for being allowed to go out or,
Oh,
changing. I went through a phase where I wanted to make sure that everyone stopped using plastic plates to help out with the environment, and so I would make my case. And so it was just honestly, it's just an innate thing for me, and
yeah.
just the thought about being an attorney was something that just came so naturally to me. And so, yeah, I followed through with what I thought would be a good fit. And that's why I went to started law school there in DR and then continued it over once I moved to the States.
Okay, awesome. And before moving, did you visit? Like, had you been to the United States before officially moving?
Yes. I
Okay.
was very, very privileged. Yeah.
Okay, because I usually like to ask, like, if anyone had any expectations of the US before moving, because I've noticed that, the media of the United States has a lot of influence, worldwide. So I've always liked to know, like, the difference. Like, what did you expect versus what happened? So if you have any examples, feel
Yeah.
free to share.
Yeah, I mean, even though I had visited, and I visited thankfully quite often because I did have family here living, and so I would visit during the summers. But my idea was still very driven by like what you're saying, by social
Mhm.
media and just generally the shows that I would watch and the
Yeah.
movies that I would watch, right? That paints like this very easy and like coveted life that you can have here. And so when I moved here, it was very difficult.
Oh,
Down to I like to say, even to my clients who have just recently arrived to the country, I like to tell them, it's adjusting here is a process because I feel like I'm still adjusting. I've
yeah.
been here for 10 years and there are things that I am still not used to. And I think the top one for me by far is the relationship with people. The
Mm,
country is not, as they portray it, where you're friends with all your neighbors and everyone. I think that that's more true to our culture in
yeah.
Dominican Republic than it is from what's portrayed in some of the movies that at least I grew up watching. Um, yeah, it's just that I don't know if cold is the right word, but just that very clear boundaries maybe, and distancing in terms of how you relate to people, and I think that that's something that's just so, so different from
Yeah.
Dominican Republic that I think that that's probably one of the things that I noticed from the get-go and one of the things that I'm still getting used to, frankly.
Yeah. So yeah, because that reminds me of like when I would go visit, we would visit again like my dad's neighborhood or my stepmom's neighborhood. And it's like, for I'm gonna use my stepmom's neighborhood for an example because she grew up yeah, in La Villa Olímpica. I don't know if that's close. Okay, if that's close to Alma Rosa, but like those are apartments and she's like, the same people are living in the same apartments like 15, 20, years later. So it's like not that people don't move in the yard, but it's like once you're settled, you're settled, right? And so she's like, you can go visit 10, 15 years later and it's the same people. And then like I remember her talking about her parents still having, their apartment and then like the neighbor will come down, check in their apartment and you have that trust in that community. And like even hearing like my husband and his family, like he was like, mami siempre hacía like una olla grande de arroz, like a lot of food in case anybody would come by, and they needed something to eat. And it's just like you're taking care of each other and you're looking out after each other. And it's like, or you would have like the little kids playing out in the neighborhood, and then like una vecina will tell like, "Hey, fulano was doing such," and just like
Yeah.
they're like all looking out for each other. So I can definitely see what you mean with that big difference in the community culture in DR versus here in the United States. And another question that I like to ask my guests is about like the cultural shock, like if they remember like the first cultural shock that they experienced. And I never wanted to mean like in a negative way or a negative tone. It's just that with the immigrant experience, like you said, it's a process. So like I had a guest, she explained how she liked to say like it was like a curve and it's usually like the first year, right? It's like the first few months you're like on a high, like, yeah, so excited and then you started slowly kinda, like, decline, and you're kinda, like, trying to get used to everything, and it is a process. So, can you tell us, first cultural shock that you can remember experiencing? And it doesn't have to be after you moved, it could be when you visited, just anything that comes to mind that you can remember.
I think that the first thing that comes to mind is something that I didn't realize until my sister mentioned it. So when I moved here, I moved to my grandparents and my aunt's house. And my parents and my sister were still living in Dominican Republic. And when they came to visit, they told me, my gosh, you're even walking faster. And I didn't realize how true that was until the moment that she said it, it immediately dawned on me that I was leaving life faster. And that is something that I had noticed. Obviously, I one of the bigger cities that I ever visited here in the US was DC, and
Mm,
everyone was just in a rush, 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 rush
yeah.
everywhere. It's like everyone has places to get to, right? And I never thought that that would necessarily happen to me. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just that here things move a lot different, and a
Yes.
lot faster. And so as soon as she said that, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is so true." I am now one of those people that I feel like, okay, I have to go to work, then I have to go to school. I barely have time to eat. So I need to be efficient with my time. I need to walk faster. And it was so funny because she would mention it every time that we would go out. even to like it we I lived in Florida when I originally moved to the US. And so we would go to the parks, either to Universal or to Disney. And that's supposed to be recreational. There's nothing that you need to get to in
Yes.
5 minutes, right? But I would always be ahead. Still, I mean, honestly, I'm thinking about it, I'm still like that. I still have to
Yeah.
be conscious about, okay, slow it down a little bit. And I think that that's probably the one of the biggest culture shocks because in DR.
Hi, Heidi here. Thank you so much for listening and supporting my podcast, but most importantly, the mission. If you would like to further support this podcast, there are a few ways you can do that. You can sign up for the newsletter. You'll receive the episodes straight to your inbox every time they drop. The link is in the show notes and the show description. You can subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. And lastly, you can donate money. That link is also in the show notes and show description. If you would like to sponsor an episode or promote your business on this show, send me an email at Heidi@HeidiDelacruz.com. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the episode.
It really does that. I think that's sort of one of the beauties of our culture that it really doesn't matter what's happening in the country. It doesn't matter how horrible things are going. You still find time to slow things down, enjoy life, enjoy the everyday, and
Yeah.
really be present and care about other people's situation too. And so I think that that's something that I carry with me. Honestly, I think about it almost
Yeah.
every day. So I think that's probably the biggest culture shock that I experienced.
Oh my goodness, you mentioned that, and I immediately go to when we visited a resort in Punta Cana, not last year, the year before last in December. And my son doesn't drink cow's milk. He drinks rice milk, but the resort didn't have rice milk, so we settled for almond milk. And it took forever to get that almond milk. And I'm like, why is this taking so long? Why is everything so slow here? And then my husband answered, like, "You're not in the US, so, like, we're in DR, like, this is how things work here, you gotta calm down," and I'm just like, like, just wanting things
Yeah,
fast, and it's just like, "Okay, yeah, I gotta calm down, they'll get it to us when they get it to us," and yeah, so that I immediately know what you mean with that fast pace of life
yeah,
that we have here. Oh
yes.
my goodness, yes. Alright, so visiting DR after moving. So, like, you're here, you're settled. Tell us about that experience.
Gosh, yeah, it was so different. I honestly it was a little bit of a bittersweet experience, I think, because at the time I didn't feel like I fully belonged here. And then when I
Mhm.
went to visit there for the first time, I also didn't feel that I fully belonged there. The friendships that I had, a few years went by in between,
Yeah.
when I moved and when I went back. And the friendships that I had weren't obviously the same because we all were now adults and had work and life happening. And so it just felt very different. It's just one of those nostalgic things that you think of what you had and what is no longer there. And
Mhm.
so I think it was good because I was happy to be back home and know exactly how things work, and I don't have to question my intuition and how to do, even like I mentioned earlier, once I was there for like a day and seeing how like the driving was done, I felt right back into it. I learned how to drive in DR, so it was helpful to me.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was also a good reminder as to why I had I had made a good decision because despite how much I love DR, I still think that moving was the best thing that I could do and that I have done for myself in order to grow in the way that I wanted to grow.
Okay. Yeah. Let's switch to your career. So, immigration attorney, you did 1 year in DR, and then you finished here in the US. If you could tell us a little bit about your experience going through law school here, Especially I so admire this, especially as English being your second language, and because I took the LSAT in 2019, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I cannot even imagine people whose, language is another or first language is another language." So, yeah, tell us about your experience going to law school, and if you can I know you had mentioned one of the biggest differences in DR was that your school was at night because practicing attorneys were the ones teaching, so if there's any, like, difference that you can, enlighten us with? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so when I moved here, I actually had to do college first and then go to law school. So it took me longer to graduate, which in and of itself was just something really difficult for me to deal with.
Mm.
I was not going to be an attorney at the age of 21, but that's okay. But once I got to law school here, it was in terms of the entirety of the process. You're right. It was really difficult in terms of so part of the LSAT, as you know, you have to take logic exams and there's
Yes.
different aspects to it. And I think it's very much geared to the way that you are taught in high school or maybe like the basic education here in the US, like the SATs. Probably I never took them, but I imagine that it's similar to that.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's just a different way of thinking. I had to go through um many practice courses.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the college that I went to, UCF, they had a connection with a local attorney who offered a program at a very, very discounted rate for UCF students. And so I was able to take that and take all of the practice exams that I could because it was very different from how my brain worked.
Mhm.
It was just I'd never taken a standardized test like that in the US. Even for admission at college, it was just so
Yeah.
different. But thankfully, I got enough of a good score to go into law school. And once I was there, it was challenging because DR, the legal system is based on the French code. And in the US, the legal system is based on common law, which is um, like English based law, English from England. And so they're very two different concepts. French
Mhm.
code is like there's a code, and what that code says is what happens, and you interpret the law based off of that. In common law, any judge, is more able to interpret the law depending on the facts and circumstances of a specific case, and there's a little bit more leeway in the way that, you interpret the law based on the common law, than there is on the French code. So I was very used to kind of like that rigidity of the French code, and
Yeah.
so constitutional law, which is a course that you take during your first year of law school, was very difficult for me because of that.
Mm.
Wrapping my head around the fact that, um, regular human beings sit on a jury and make a decision about whether someone goes to jail or not, was very difficult because I just didn't have that legal background. But, um, I would say that that was probably the hardest part for me, and obviously just being comfortable speaking in public in terms
Oh, yeah.
participation in class and analyzing cases and feeling like, well, I'm still an outsider. I'm not really sure if like I'm even saying the right words, but
That happens to me all the time. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because I work in the medical field, so I'm like, with the medical terms and stuff,
yes.
and I'm just like, "Am I saying this right?" Like, am I you oh my all the time, all the I'm just like, "Sorry, my Spanish gets mixed in with my English." That's what happens.
Yes, exactly. So, um, but I mean, I would say that I still enjoyed law school. It was hard. It was very, very hard. But if that's something that you really wanna do, I would encourage other people to go through it,
Yeah.
because, I mean, I love being an attorney, I love being able to help people, but it's just gonna be very difficult. It definitely tested, my I guess, my interest, just making sure that I was really interested
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
in going through with this because it was difficult. I mean, you're in a room full of other people as smart, if not smarter than you all the time, and that's that's really hard.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you went through and you were able, after law school and pass the bar because that's another test that you have to take to be then sworn in and everything. So you made it through and now you are a practicing attorney, which is amazing. And I wanted to ask, I know this wasn't one of the questions, but you learn English in DR or here?
I did. I learned English in DR, but it was truly based on my trips here to the US. So
Yeah.
because
Okay.
I I literally would come, I was very privileged that I had the opportunity to come almost every summer while I was growing up, and my cousins refused to speak to me in Spanish so that I would learn how to speak English.
Nice.
When I was here, in sort of like not in a mean way, but like in a practice type of way.
Yeah.
And that's really how I learned how to speak conversational English. It was helpful that I had to go through college here because I would not have been as prepared as I was for law school had I just gone from DR to law school here. I
Yeah.
think it would have been much more difficult.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you're in the field of immigration, and there is a lot of misconceptions that goes on about the process, about different visas and all of that. So, is there any common misconception that about the immigration process that you can clear, or like just one that you can clear up for the audience?
I think probably that just in general that immigration cases or that it's easy to get status in the country and that it's fast and that it's free. That's just a huge misconception that exists. It's actually um, only specific individuals qualify for specific type of benefits. And going through the application process is something that takes patience, and it often takes a long time to be able to reach that permanent status that allows a person to work, travel, and return to the US in order to be able to live here. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a huge misconception to think that it's easy, fast, and free.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of money, like a
Yeah,
lot of money.
it is. It is. It
And
definitely
not even the attorney fees, I'm talking about the filing fees, like, the
right.
fees that you have to pay to process the applications and stuff, which is,
Right.
why it's a lot of money. Jennifer, thank you so much for this time and for sharing your story and your journey with me and the audience. It's been such a great time. The last question that I love asking my guests to wrap up the conversation is, what does the American dream mean to you?
It means having the safety and the ability to pursue the dreams that you have in the way that really maximizes your dreams and really benefits everyone around you. I think that that's truly the American dream. It's just a melting pot of different individuals wanting to make their lives and those around them much easier and wonderful. So I think that that's what the American dream means to me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And quickly, if someone, maybe wants to get in contact with you or your law practice, for consultation or a question, how can they get in contact?
Sure, they can follow us on TikTok, Instagram. Our TikTok handle and Instagram are Las Abogadas RVA. It's called Arrington Law. We're also known as Las Abogadas del Pueblo. We're based out of Richmond, Virginia, but we can help pretty much anyone nationwide.
Yes, yes, awesome. Yep, because immigration law is federal, so you guys can definitely help anywhere. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Thank
Thank
you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Mummy Podcast.